For more than 1,000 years, an entire civilization was shouting at us, and nobody could understand a word. The temples of Egypt are covered, floor to ceiling, in beautiful little pictures. Owls and eyes, snakes and feet, suns and stars, millions of them carved with incredible care. And for around 1400 years, not one person alive could read them. The voice of ancient Egypt had gone completely silent. This is the story of how we got it back. This is the story of hieroglyphs, what they really are, how they were lost, and the detective work that finally cracked the code, how we got here. First, let's clear up the biggest misunderstanding about hieroglyphs. Most people assume they're picture writing, that a little drawing of a bird simply means bird, and you just read the pictures like a comic strip. For a long time, the cleverest people in the world assumed exactly that, and it's why they failed to read them for centuries. Because hieroglyphs aren't really picture writing. They're a full, sophisticated writing system, one that can record anything a spoken language can say: names, poetry, laws, jokes, complaints, love letters. And the secret is that those little pictures mostly don't stand for things at all. They mostly stand for sounds. Here's the key idea. Most hieroglyphs are sound signs. A picture of an owl doesn't mean owl, it stands for the sound M, the way our letter M does. A picture of a mouth stands for an R sound. So the Egyptians spelled words out, sound by sound, using pictures of things that had nothing to do with the word they were writing. Just like you might spell a word with letters that are, if you think about it, just little shapes. Now it's not quite that simple, and this is what makes it clever. The system mixed three kinds of signs. Some signs were sounds like an alphabet. Some signs did stand for a whole word on their own, and some signs, called determinatives, weren't spoken at all. They were silent clues placed at the end of a word to tell you what category it belonged to. So if you spelled out a word that could mean several things, a little picture at the end would whisper, "This one's a person," or "This one's about travel," or "This one's a god." There's even a neat trick built in. Hieroglyphs could be written left to right, right to left, or top to bottom. How do you know which way to read? You look at the animals and people. They always face toward the beginning of the line. The birds look back to where you should start. The writing tells you how to read it if you know to ask. So this was a rich, flexible system of around 700 signs, and learning it was hard. The people who mastered it were the scribes, and if you've heard our story of everyday life in Egypt, you'll remember them. Becoming a scribe meant years of training, copying signs over and over until your hand knew them by heart. But it was worth it, because a scribe never had to haul stone or harvest in the sun. Writing was power. The Egyptians themselves called their writing the words of the gods. To them, it was sacred, carved onto temple walls and tombs to last forever, to speak to the gods, and to carry a person's name into eternity. And a name mattered enormously. The Egyptians believed that as long as your name was spoken or read, a part of you lived on. To write someone's name was to keep them alive. For everyday business, though letters, receipts, stories, carving little owls was far too slow. So scribes also used a quick, joined-up version, a kind of cursive, that they brushed onto papyrus in a fraction of the time. Same language, faster hand. For 3,000 years, this writing recorded everything, and then it stopped. Egypt's world slowly changed. New rulers came: Greeks, then Romans. New religions spread. The old gods and the temples that served them gradually faded. And with them faded the small number of priests and scribes who still knew how to read the ancient signs. Around 1600 years ago, someone carved the very last hieroglyphic inscription, and then there was no one left who could read it. The knowledge wasn't written down in a way outsiders could use. It simply lived in people's minds, and when those people were gone, it was gone. So the writing became a mystery. For over 1,000 years, scholars stared at Egyptian temples and guessed, and almost all of them guessed the same wrong thing, that each picture was a symbol of some deep, mystical idea. They wrote long, confident books explaining that a particular sign meant the soul rising or the harmony of the universe. They were completely wrong. They were trying to read sounds as if they were secret philosophy. The harder they tried, the more lost they got. The voice of Egypt was right there on every wall, and humanity had forgotten how to listen. Then, in 1799, soldiers digging near an Egyptian town called Rosetta pulled a dark, broken slab of stone out of an old wall. And on it was the most useful thing anyone trying to crack a code could ever hope for. The Rosetta Stone had the same message carved on it 3 times in 3 different scripts. At the top, hieroglyphs. In the middle, that everyday Egyptian cursive. And at the bottom, ancient Greek. And here's why that mattered so much. People could still read ancient Greek. It had never been lost. So for the first time, the world had the unknown writing sitting right beside a known translation of the very same words. It was a key. Somewhere in that Greek text were the meanings hiding in those mysterious little pictures. Now someone just had to be brilliant enough and stubborn enough to match them up. That someone was a young Frenchman named Jean-François Champollion. He was a gifted linguist who, by his 20s, could read a dozen ancient languages, including Coptic, a late form of the Egyptian language itself, which gave him a precious clue to how the old words might have sounded. He worked for years, and his great breakthrough was to throw out the old assumption. He dared to believe that the signs were mostly sounds, not symbols. He focused on the cartouches, those oval rings the Egyptians drew around the names of their kings and queens, like a frame around something important. He knew from the Greek which royal names should appear, so he took names that were already known like Ptolemy and Cleopatra and matched their sounds letter by letter to the hieroglyphs inside the rings. A sign in Ptolemy's name and the same sign in Cleopatra's name had to make the same sound, and they did. The pattern held. It worked. The signs were an alphabet of sounds after all. The story goes that in 1822, when Champollion finally saw the whole system snap into place, he ran to his brother's office, cried out, "I've got it," and collapsed, overwhelmed. He had just heard a voice that had been silent for 14 centuries. And here's what makes this one of the greatest moments in all of history. Champollion didn't just read one stone, he found the key to all of it. Suddenly, every temple wall, every painted tomb, every dusty papyrus scroll could be read again. 3,000 years of Egyptian voices came flooding back at once. And what they said was wonderful and surprisingly human. Not just spells and the names of kings, but a tax record, a worker complaining that he hadn't been paid, a schoolboy's lines copied as punishment, a doctor's notes, love poems, letters between families. The Egyptians stopped being silent statues on a wall and became people again, people who worried and joked and loved, just like us. That's the real magic of writing. The Egyptians believed their writing could carry a person's name into eternity. They were right, they just didn't know it would take a French linguist and a broken stone to finish the journey. They wrote their words down so they would last forever, and after a long, silent gap, forever finally arrived. Writing is the closest thing we have to a time machine. Someone 4,500 years ago pressed marks into stone, and you can still hear them today. It makes you wonder which of our words will still be speaking long after we're gone. If you ever wondered how we got here, you're in the right place. See you in the next one.